So today we're in for a treat. Joining us from Athens is Professor Christina Koulouri, who is a professor for contemporary and modern history at the Panteion University for social and political sciences, and she is also Chancellor of the very same university. Welcome, Professor Koulouri. Thank you for taking the time. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be with you.
Great. So this month's issue of Public History Weekly is concerned with history and justice. You wrote about an attempt to rewrite history in 21st century Greece, namely the trial and retrial of the six. So could you briefly recap who these six men were and also what makes this story so special in your view?
Well, 100 years ago, in 1922, Greece experienced one of the worst defeats in its history, the so-called Asia Minor Catastrophe. This was a result of the First World War, because Greece actually continued the First World War after the end of the war. And from 1919 to 1922, the Greek army landed on Asia Minor, of course, following the Allies' decision. So the Greek army was in Asia Minor and nothing was finalized regarding the borders. In Greece, there was a very a division between the prime minister, who was Eleftherios Venizelos, and the king, King Constantine. So Greece was divided over the First World War, because King Constantine was an ally of Germany. So he didn't want Greece to join the First World War. But finally, Venizelos won the elections, so he decided for Greece to be with the Allies during the First World War. So what happened is that in 1920, Venizelos was defeated in the election. So it was Constantine and the political party, which was royalist, that came to power. So they decided to continue the campaign in Asia Minor, which finally ended with a disastrous defeat in 1922. And this was really a humanitarian, military, political, social defeat at all levels. It was a catastrophe, as we say. So refugees, but also Greeks, wanted the culprits to pay, to be punished. So the trial of the six was actually the final act of the Asia Minor campaign, when 5 politicians, former prime ministers and ministers, and 1 military officer, the commander-in-chief of the Asia Minor army, were sentenced to death. And this was actually the punishment. It was perceived, especially by the refugees and Greek society, as a fair act, that it was a kind of redemption and fair punishment of those who were guilty for this catastrophe and trauma. I mean, 87 years later, the grandson of one of the prime ministers who were executed in 1922 asked for the retrial. And actually, the Supreme Court took a decision in 2010, which revised the initial verdict of 1922, and they were declared not guilty.
Do you think, in terms of consequences, so the court ruling of 2010 must have some kind of consequences in terms of really material manifestations? Have textbooks been revised, or has terminology been revised? Have there been formal apologies or maybe like changes to commemorative rituals?
Yeah, well, nothing happened. Nothing at all. The court ruling was a rather symbolic act that had no consequences on history writing. In fact, it was perceived by Greek historians as a biased decision caused by the ideological preferences of the members of the Supreme Court. Greek historiography has quite accurately described the trial of the Sikhs as the final act of the Asia Minor campaign. History is not a court. So although a court sometimes thinks that they can write history, but the opposite does not happen. So the interpretation is quite balanced, that we understand that the Asia Minor campaign and defeat was a very complex phenomenon. And of course, responsibilities cannot be attributed to only 6 people. So it is the historiographical interpretation is more complex and nuanced, and so I don't think that this new verdict has changed anything. So his textbooks have not changed, and rituals have not changed because there are no rituals. I mean, the trial of the Sikhs has not been remembered actually. So I don't think that this was a verdict that actually influenced historical writing, but it was perceived, I mean, by the descendants, the physical descendants and the political heirs of this political party, meaning the royalists, can invoke this revision of 2010. But that's all. I mean, it is an internal political issue.
Okay, very interesting, because I found it strange even that you wrote that the court decision happened in the absence of historians. So while I was reading, I was really wondering, like, were the historians, did they comment, or was it so irrelevant, maybe even to public debate, that there was no need?
Well, there were some articles written by historians in newspapers, but this was not actually an important event for public debate. Maybe it seems strange, but the trial of the Sikhs cannot be compared to the other trials, like the trials in Nuremberg, for example, or other trials, because it had no international impact. It was limited in Greek interior politics. But symbolically, it is interesting that almost 100 years later, a Supreme Court actually decides based on what data, on what evidence, that the decision taken 87 years ago was wrong. So this is interesting as a fact, but it has no real impact in political life and in historiography, of course.
So I have 2 follow-up questions. The first is that in the English articles I read, there was mention of like Great Britain taking offense or issue with the decision with the first trial, and that it did lead to international pressure or diplomatic tensions. But was the retrial commented as well, or is it perhaps even exaggerated in the text you can read in English online?
Well, the first trial actually had an international impact, because Britain was playing an important role in Greece at that time. Great Britain was in favor of the monarchy. So, as I said, the people who went to trial and sentenced to death were allies of the Greek king, of King Constantine. So it was an internal conflict, but with international consequences, because there were pressures from especially Great Britain that these people are not executed. But we have to understand that it was in the aftermath of the First World War. So the historical context was completely different. In 2010, nobody was interested in this rather local court decision. I don't know if they actually heard about that.
Mm-hmm. And so the second follow-up question is about this grandson, Michalis Protopapadakis. Um, and when he was interviewed, he did mention that this decision to bring forth this new evidence for him was triggered by his son approaching him and saying, well, you know, my teacher in school said granddad was a traitor. Do you think this is a very individual, personal staging of this fate by this specific descendant, or have political parties also, you know, joined in and used this retrial for their purposes?
Well, I think that both levels exist. I mean, there is this family history, and that, of course, we can see many analogies with the German descendants of the Nazis, for example, children in the 60s who revolted, actually, because they could not deal with the traumatic memory of being the children of traitors or, you know, perpetrators. So it is much easier to be the son or the grandson of a victim. This is an international phenomenon, I think. I think that Petro Papadakis was exaggerating his personal and family, let's say, memory, because I don't think that many children in Greek schools know who was the grandfather. I mean, it is not like, you know, an eminent personality of Greek history. So I don't really think that the grandson had problems at school. However, at the political level, it is true that there is a political faction, pro-royalist, conservative, right-wing, who are the political heirs of that period. So they really want to be distinguished from this legacy, or to get rid of this shame. And so the revision of the trial is also part of the revision of the history of that period. So who was really responsible for the Asia Minor catastrophe? It was not the king. So as I explained, there was a division between the liberal prime minister, Eleftherios Venizelos, and the conservative King Constantine. So they really want to revise history and say Venizelos was responsible. So it was by chance that these 6 people were there at the wrong moment. But it was actually the Asia Minor campaign decided by Venizelos before them. So they were not actually the main responsible people. So there are consequences in the present. And we know that history can be instrumentalized in political conflicts in every historical moment. So it was a question of 2010 and the revision of the right-wing historical memory.
Okay, so division is like a very strong theme in our interview now and also in your text. There's this division between the Venizelists and the Royalists, kind of victims and perpetrators, winners and losers. Do you think that Greek national identity is divided today because of these past conflicts?
Well, and national identity is never homogeneous. We know that there are internal conflicts and negotiations and different hybrid forms of national identity, local identities, other kind of social identities, which are in dialogue with national identity. More or less, there is a core of Greek national identity which is not questioned by anybody regarding language, religion, etc. And history. I don't think there are many differences and these kind of divisions. So I wouldn't really exaggerate this division, which is mainly political division. It is around interpretation of historical personalities, or historical events. But I don't think there are today that there are in Greece really strong internal issues about who is a Greek.
So my final question is perhaps about this kind of core of Greek national identity and how it relates to the idea of historical justice. Do you think that this kind of trial and retrial happened because the Asia Minor Catastrophe itself has this kind of central significance to a kind of Greek let's say a national historical identity?
Absolutely. It is, I mean, this year we commemorate the centennial of the Asia Minor Catastrophe. And in the 20th century, there are 2 or 3 major historical events in Greek history and which have an impact on Greek national identity. So Asia Minor Catastrophe is one of them. And it is important for a Greek national identity because of the influx of 1.2 million refugees in a country of 5 million inhabitants. So you can understand that these populations coming from the east, from across the Aegean Sea, they were not only assimilated in Greek society, but they changed Greek national identity. They had a very important contribution to Greek historical memory and national identity. So yes, it is important because it is related to such an important historical event for national identity.
Wow. Thank you so much for these fascinating insights. So we talked about different kinds of conflicts, national identity. Can you tell maybe readers who don't read Greek where they can read up on these kinds of reflections on Greek history? I mean, obviously, we're going to recommend everyone to read your article, which is called History in Court, Punishment of the Asia Minor Catastrophe. But still, if people are interested.
Well, I have all my publications online, so I think that with my name in academia, they can find there are many publications in English, so and in French, but also in English.
Brilliant. So we're going to provide a link to your article and also maybe to your publication because we have a multilingual audience and we'd love to start a debate about these very interesting and significant ideas and conflicts that are relevant to all kinds of social contexts. I'm just very happy to have had the chance to talk to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye.